Contribution of Lenin 1917 to 1924. Lenin's role in bringing about the October Revolution 1917. Trotsky sums up Lenin's contribution saying, "If neither Lenin nor I had been present in St. Petersburg, there would have been no October Revolution. The leadership of the Bolshevik party would have prevented it from occurring. Of this I have not the slightest doubt." In April 1917, on Lenin's return with the April theses, the Bolshevik attitude towards the provisional government transformed. Pravda had given the provisional government a cautious welcome. Stalin and others had announced that they were prepared to work with it. Lenin's April theses, calling for the overthrow of the Prime Minister, Lvov, and his ministers, were received badly at first, but Lenin was able to defeat the opposition of Zinoviev and Kamenev to persuade the party that they should prepare for revolution. Lenin's role as a theorist. His adoption of Marxism to fit Russian circumstances became known as Marxism-Leninism. Marx forecasted proletarian revolutions in industrial societies. Russia was a peasant society with a tiny proletariat. Lenin's insistence that a party of professional revolutionaries could seize power, telescope together the bourgeois and proletarian revolutions, and establish a communist regime in backward Russia. This is what made the October Revolution possible. Without Marxism-Leninism, there would have been no Bolshevism. Lenin establishing Bolshevik authority immediately after the October Revolution 1917. After the October Revolution, Lenin insisted that the Bolsheviks rule as a one-party state. He forced this through against the opposition of leading Bolsheviks who wanted a social coalition alliance with the SRs and Mensheviks in a constituent assembly. Lenin closed down the constituent assembly, and by 1923 all other political parties were banned. Lenin refused to share power with any other political parties. Lenin's leadership in the Civil War. Lenin made key decisions, closing down the constituent assembly because he knew the Bolsheviks wouldn't do well, and reduced the rights of other political parties. Lenin signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, which brought Russia out of World War I, but Russia had lost a lot of land, resources and population, but Lenin had no choice. This allowed the Reds to focus on winning the Civil War. Lenin brought in the introduction of war communism, which seized food from the peasants and supplies from industry to be given to the army. Lenin supported the use of Red Terror via the Cheka, which he suppressed opposition. The Cheka shot 8,000 people in 1918, taking action against the SRs and the Mensheviks. The Cheka also executed the Tsar and his family in 1918, which deprived the unifying aim of the whites. Lenin supported Trotsky's decision to restore the hierarchical structures in the army, which brought back generals and commanders, but also introduced discipline. Lenin knew that this was an action that was necessary. This action was not popular among the soldiers, as they thought the army would be equal in every stage. Lenin's pragmatism and ability to adapt Bolshevik theories and economics to meet the situation in reality 1918 to 1924. Lenin was very willing to adapt his Bolshevik ideologies to meet the political, military and economic realities that Russia faced between 1918 and 1924. One of his biggest adoptions was the signing of the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany in 1918 to remove Russia from World War I. As a result of the treaty, Russia lost the Ukraine, Finland, the Baltic provinces, parts of Poland and Georgia. It lost 32% of its agricultural land, 34% of its population, and 54% of its industry, and Russia had to pay compensation to Germany. The Bolsheviks needed peace to survive. Lenin also believed that Germany would soon be defeated by the Allies, and the treaty would become null and void. Lenin knew that they needed to leave the World War, even though the treaty was economically damaging, to focus on winning the Civil War. Lenin further supported Trotsky in creating a traditional hierarchical system in the Red Army via 50,000 ex-SRS officers, which was vital support against opposition from leading Bolsheviks such as Stalin. Trotsky would not have got this through without Lenin, and if he did not have Lenin, the Bolsheviks might have well lost the Civil War. Lenin introduced economic policies to help the Bolsheviks survive. He brought in the policy of war communism in 1918 to help win the Civil War. The policy involved the nationalization of industry and the requisitioning of grain from the peasants. War communism was an instrument in helping the Bolsheviks win the Civil War, but by 1921, Lenin recognized that the policy of war communism was not suitable for a post-Civil War situation. It was causing increased resistance and disillusionment. In 1921, Lenin persuaded a very reluctant party to accept the compromises of the new economic policy, NEP, which reintroduced some elements of capitalism, but this was necessary to try and stabilize the economy. Nationalities issue. Lenin was prepared to use force to keep some national groups in line, especially in Azerbaijan, Armenia and Georgia. However, Lenin was also prepared to guarantee freedoms to Muslims in order to win their support. It was a policy of necessary compromise. The new Soviet Constitution of 1923 formally set up the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR, was a recognition that a federal system of government was needed to hold together a land of great ethnic diversity. Lenin's willingness to use terror as an instrument of policy. There was opposition to the Bolsheviks between 1918 and 1924. Lenin was willing to use terror as an instrument of policy to put down this opposition. Lenin believed that the Bolsheviks had to survive whatever the cost. Lenin had a strong streak of ruthlessness and cruelty. He used the Cheka to subdue opposition, which were nicknamed the Red Terror during the Civil War period, and was particularly contemptuous of the peasantry. Lenin, during the Civil War period, ordered for the execution of the kulaks who resisted the requisitioning of grain, and encouraged class warfare in the villages. Lenin believed this ruthlessness was necessary to survival, to the point that he decided to execute the Tsar and his family in 1918. Their continued existence during the Civil War was seen to present too much of a threat, as it provided a focus for the anti-Bolshevik groups. Lenin's ability to evolve Russian society between 1918 and 1924. Lenin used culture to evolve the Russian society to try and create a pro-Bolshevik society. Lenin reduced the power of the Russian Orthodox Church, as it was seen as an instrument of the old Tsarist regime to control the people. Lenin separated the Church from the state with the 1918 Decree of Freedom of Conscience. The Church also lost its privileged status and land. Its churches were then destroyed or converted for a functional manner. The policies failed to stamp out the influence of the Russian Orthodox Church completely, but they were able to ridicule the Church, which did significantly reduce its influence over the people. Lenin also had an attempt at remoulding the traditional family unit by influencing children to challenge parental authority and by getting wives to challenge the authority of their husbands. Families were also encouraged to live communally and share cooking facilities. Lenin also granted women new rights and freedoms. The Bolshevik Family Code of 1918 made divorces easier and abortions were made legal. Lenin's attitude towards the family was successful to the extent that there was more strengths than weaknesses. Lenin also had an influence over culture, but during the Civil War, the influence was limited. However, Lenin did want to keep the writers and artists on side. Lenin set up a Ministry of Culture, the Commissariat of Enlightenment. Many artists welcomed this support, especially since Lenin was prepared to tolerate artists who were not communists. They were known as fellow travelers. Whilst Lenin decided to extend the Bolshevik influence over cultural life of the country, there was an increase in talented artists leaving Russia, which in turn had a negative impact on the arts in general. Even with the immigration of talented artists, Lenin was successful at producing effective propaganda via art, architecture, literature, theatre, music, radio and cinema. Summary. Lenin was also a very prioritised and focused leader. He had great organisational abilities and leadership skills, together with a strong personality to force through decisions in the Politburo and the Central Committee. He was tough, hard and calculating. Lenin was a good orator, as he was able to express his ideas simply and could make his audience understand complicated political concepts. Lenin was good in an argument by being able to bring people around to his views. Lenin was above all a pragmatist. The survival of Bolshevism was the key to the point that other communist ideologies were sacrificed. He was prepared to accept the humiliation of the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk and the military necessity of using bourgeois officers in the Red Army and the temporary abandonment of Bolshevik economic theory. Lenin was prepared to adjust the ideology to meet the immediate necessity and had no hesitation about using terror to suppress opposition.